everyone, welcome to the Hitchhiker's Way podcast. Our guest for this week is someone really inspirational and amazing. He started a podcast, he went through YC, and he's helping millions of people through his startup Career Karma. I'm happy to host Ruben Harris in today's show right now. So, hey Ruben, how's it going?
Hi, very happy to be on your show as well.
I really appreciate that you took out the time for this. I know you're like traveling and you're really busy right now. So, thank you for being here. So, let's
Problem.
start with humble beginnings. Can you tell us a bit about your childhood and your upbringing? It is said that people with traumatic childhoods develop the drive to succeed and prove things to the world. How were you like?
Yeah, so a lot of my stories about my childhood is covered. I didn't have a traumatic childhood experience. I grew up to parents that are doctors. One of them is an oncologist and hematologist, the other one is a psychologist. But I did grow up understanding the importance of education, hard work, and the importance of doing something good in the world. And so I went to Montessori school. My first language was Spanish. I grew up playing the cello since I was four. And I went through church schools my whole life. And I grew up in the church. And so I also understood that on top of hard work and creating things and the value of education, we all have a purpose. And so it's important to search for what your purpose is on this earth so that whatever you build and whatever you create serves that greater purpose. And growing up and going through school, even through college, I did not know what that purpose is. And I tried a bunch of different things, including throwing parties and investment banking and all kinds of other things like cutting lawns and selling CDs and being on online forums and trying to be a professional video game player, in addition to being the best musician in the world because I played the cello. But when I stumbled onto the finance industry, that's how I discovered that technology industry because people started leaving the finance industry to get into tech. And that's when I realized that tech was going to change the whole world.
All right. Speaking about purpose, you told that you didn't find your purpose in your 20s or when you were going through college. You did a lot of different things, right?
Hmm.
I stumbled upon a story in an article. It told that you really loved playing cello and your teacher asked you to understand business to become a professional musician.
Hmm.
And that's how you got into investment banking. You tried investment
Hmm.
banking to learn
That's right.
business. But before all of that, before investment banking, before you were playing cello, you did a lot of different things, right? Did you
Hmm.
like entrepreneurship? Did you love selling things? And did you have any idea of becoming a founder, starting your own business someday in your life?
Yeah, I would say most of my life growing up, I was just more like, I want to make a lot of money when I grow up. And so a lot of the professions that I explored were, being a doctor, being an architect, being an engineer, being a surgeon, or starting a business. Those are all things that like I thought about growing up. And yes, I did try different entrepreneurial things. I sold slushies, I sold lemonade, I sold candy, I did all kinds of things like that. But I think by starting to create goals about how to make money and reading books about people that made money and entrepreneurs and um, how to get there, I learned that a lot of very successful people at the time went through investment banking. So that's how I was like, investment banking is interesting. My cousin told me about investment banking. And like you said, my sister's violin teacher's husband told me to do investment banking. And my child teacher's wife told me to try business because the art world is funded by a lot of business people. And after you read the stories of a lot of people, you see common patterns, and finance tends to be one of the key common threads.
So the way you got inside investment banking is like super inspiring, and I think you put out like 1,900 emails to potential employers, and you cold called a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah,
So through that, you took a course and got into BMO,
yeah,
and from there you started learning business. But
yeah.
you you got in touch with Balaji Srinivasan, and that's
Yeah,
really interesting. Can you explain how you got his attention, and can you explain how that led you to quit your investment banking job, which you worked so hard for, and then moving to Silicon Valley right away?
yeah. So the course I took was called Breaking into Wall Street. And after I got into investment banking, I was working in Chicago at BMO, but then I worked in Atlanta. And in Chicago at BMO, there was a accelerator called 1871. And then in Atlanta, there was something called Atlanta Tech Village. And so whenever I wasn't at the bank, I would be at these tech centers. And if I wasn't at the tech centers, I would be at the art centers like the Joffrey Ballet because I still care about art. And so what's interesting is in Atlanta, there's a company called BitPay. And so BitPay was a Bitcoin startup that was a competitor to Coinbase. And so um, Coinbase raised their Series B while I was at the investment bank in Atlanta. And one of the people that tweeted about it was Balaji Srinivasan. And this was when Balaji had less than 1,000 followers. And so I followed him. I started studying him, retweeting him, DMing him. Um, and that's when I discovered that he had something called the Bitcoin Stanford Group. And the Bitcoin Stanford Group had a guy named Eric Smalls in it. And he was the roommate of my cousin who was at Stanford. And I was like, oh, wow. So Balaji's tied to this Bitcoin Stanford Group. Maybe I should organize a hackathon leveraging the Bitcoin Stanford Group in Silicon Valley with the people in Atlanta. And I tweeted about it, and I think that got his attention. And in addition to Bitcoin, he was also talking about education. He's really passionate about education because Andreessen Horowitz at the time was talking about massive open online courses and MOOCs. And so he sent me a DM saying, what's your background? We should get you into tech. And then I followed up, and then he told me to read Blake Masters' notes. And this was before Zero to One was actually a book. And so that's how I got connected to him. And then he said to meet with him, and so he added me on LinkedIn, and then I met with him in a Starbucks in Palo Alto. And so yeah, that's how I started.
So you got connected to big, big personalities before, and you didn't know anyone from to the field that you were going to. You just had so much courage. Would you consider yourself as someone with a lot of self confidence from the beginning that you could accomplish anything?
Yeah. Um, the answer is yes. I think the and what you just said is correct. Where I moved to Silicon Valley knowing zero people, and I was able to build a network. But I think that confidence and self awareness is underrated. And I think that if you think highly of yourself, regardless of what society thinks about your qualifications, then that is a competitive advantage. And so I have always had a confidence that some people might even say, I just say there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And sometimes you got to have this maniacal drive and this like radical self belief that some people might be turned off by, but it allows you to run through walls.
That's really great. So you got into SF without nothing, without no network,
Mhm.
and you got a job at Al School from Jane Yu. How did you meet her, and how did you like convince her to get in the 6 week program? I guess it was like a 6 week contract, and
Like
then
three
you
months.
made the job permanent, right?
Yeah.
So how did
So,
that all happen?
so it goes back to what I said around like if I had this mindset that was some people will describe as humble, but I think is more elite or traditional. Some people say it's like more traditional where you have to follow certain paths and go to certain companies and go to certain schools. When I first moved to the Bay Area, I had a whole list of companies I wanted to work for, and I had a list of people that I wanted to meet. And one of my friends said, "Hey, you should meet this guy." And the guy was working at a coffee shop in San Francisco. He was not working at any tech company, and some people would just ignore that. They'll say it's a distraction, right? Because I only had a place to live for a month, and I was already in like week two and a half or
Where
three.
were you living? Like in a hacker house or something? Like
Yeah, I was living
when
in
you got.
Agape. I was living in Agape in the Mission with about 14 people. There's a guy named Justin Rosenstein that invented the Facebook like button in GChat, and he's a co-founder of Asana. I was living at his house with a bunch of other amazing rock star people. If I followed the traditional mindset, I would have never talked to my buddy Alex. So my buddy Josh said, "Hey, you need to talk to Alex at a coffee shop." And I talked to him, and it was a great conversation, and it pretty much said, "Hey, we should hang out." And then when I added him on LinkedIn, I saw that he used to work at Google. I was like, interesting. And then when I added him there, I noticed that he knew someone at alt school, which was JNU. And so he's the one who set up the introduction to JNU. And when I met with JNU, who's like a sister to me now, and I'm glad we're having this interview because I should check out with her. She told me they're not hiring at all. And so we had a conversation about my background, and I was sad because that was a Friday. But that same night or that next day, she said, "Hey, are you willing to do a contract for the holiday?" So I had a choice to make. I had to either say yes and maybe turn it into something full time or continue looking for full time. But something felt right about it, and I decided to follow Jane, and that was the right decision.
How did you make it full time? Like from there, you were working on a 6-week contract, and how did it become full time?
You have to deliver, right? If people have goals that they want you to set, then what I like about Silicon Valley is not about where you went to school. It's not about, what companies that you work for. It's can you actually do the work? And if you can't do the work, then there's no more job for you, you know? Or there might be a job for you somewhere else where people don't do work, you know? And so the short answer is I had no clear guarantee that this was going to turn into something full time. I just did what I was asked, and I was also proactive about doing things that I wasn't asked in order to achieve the business objectives.
So on the site, your co-founders also had a software engineering job,
Mhm.
and you met them before at investment banking, I guess.
Mhm.
So you all started a podcast, breaking into
Yep.
startups, right?
Yep. Yep. That's right.
So why did you start it, and how did it? I know a lot of articles read about this thing, but I would like to hear from you personally. And how did it actually lead you to start Career Karma? Who came
Yeah.
up
So
with the idea of starting a podcast?
we came up with it together because um, making a transition into a new job or into a job is very emotionally draining. It's very tough. It's very heart wrenching almost. My brother went to a boot camp. My co-founders went through boot camps, and so when we were going through these processes, like sometimes we would be at the point of tears, and so we had to do things in order to motivate ourselves. We had to go to the gym every day. We had to eat the right foods. We had to sleep well. We had to um, listen to music. And so, but what you also do in Silicon Valley, you start going to these happy hours with tech people. And what starts to happen is you realize that when you hear stories of other people, you are inspired. And we started asking ourselves, what if we had a podcast of stories of other people that are like us that are going through this process? Like how motivated will we be as we're going through these transitions? And so that's how it started. And then we're like, let's interview stories of people that didn't follow the traditional route to get into technology, because the only thing that you hear in the media is CEOs and like Sam Altman and Elon Musk, which are amazing, or VCs like Sequoia and Y Combinator, but you never really hear the stories of the operators in the company. doing things. And so I was like, who are the first 10 people at Google? Who are the first 10 people at, at pick a company, any company, Airbnb, right? And so, um, by interviewing those stories and highlighting those stories of women and men and people that come from different backgrounds, that actually led into the movement that we had. But I think it didn't start off as something for a business, but I think by doing that, we essentially established ourselves as thought leaders on a space. And what I'll say is, we discovered that every company is a media company, but every person is a media company themselves. And so, if you're not telling your own story, other people are going to tell stories about you, and you are responsible for telling your own story.
So now you started a podcast. Before podcast was a huge hit, right? And now podcasts are like really huge that even startups are building podcast by side. And do you think that is okay for a startup to build a podcast by side and do marketing that side?
Yeah,
Yep.
I think that's very important. I think it's almost necessary. But before you do a podcast, you got to be very clear on what you're building, what you're talking about, what problem that you're solving. Because one thing that was very important for us, at least with our podcast, was we didn't want to create interviews that you just listen to that you can't do anything with. So I had to have very clear action items that you can take away with whatever it is that you listen to. So if you have a product, it should be very clear how you can sign up. It should be very clear how you can get customers. But at the same time, it shouldn't be a commercial either that only talks about you. So that's that's what I would say.
And then you went on to start Career Karma. And speaking about your startup and co founders, I want to hear the story. How did you actually meet them? Like, let's just say if you are a solo founder and you're looking to start a company, and what would you actually look for in a co-founder? Because co-founder is like a really important thing, right? Even getting into YC, co-founder is something that they mostly look out for. How would you advise other people to find their co-founder, their mate to build company with?
How did I meet? So when I was in investment banking, Archer and I started talking about things that weren't finance. We started talking about music because he plays the accordion. And then I also talked to him about the website that he created to buy and sell modern art. And then, we talked about it for hours. And then he was like, guess what? I was like, what? He said, I got a twin brother. I was like, really? That's pretty cool. So we started hanging out. It was super cool to hang out with them. And then after that, we started like going to these Atlanta Tech Village meetings that I was telling you about before and learning the YC philosophy pretty much. Actually, before talking to Balaji, I wanted to talk to Balaji because he looked like my friend Apurva in investment banking. And so I thought it was just funny. And then that's what got us into studying the Y Combinator ecosystem. And now we're still studying the Y Combinator ecosystem.
All right. So you started the company with Tim and Arthur, and how did the early days of Career Karma actually look like? Like and there should have been like a lot of pivotal points right now, as of now. But out of all of that, what do you think is the biggest win that happened to Career Karma in early on when you were working?
Early on, depends on what part of would you say early. I think getting into SEO was a big factor. I think understanding SEO was a big factor. I think being early on the skills first trend is a big factor. I think the pandemic actually helped a lot by emphasizing the importance of skills first remote work, hybrid theories. It also forced online education and flexible formats like part-time and full-time self-paced. And also AI actually helped everything that we've been talking about historically. With that said, um, it still feels like we're in YC because now that all the AI stuff is happening, we kind of gotta reinvent the whole business. But yeah, I'll say those are the biggest ones.
So early on, getting into YC was the first inflection point that you felt in your heart that this is going to succeed, right?
Well, it's less about what I see. Like I would say, like the homework that my co-founders and I put into understanding the market, I think that gave us the confidence that we're working on the right thing, regardless of what our current approach to a solution is. Because what you got to realize is that whatever your current solution is probably going to change. Like a company is never its first product. Like I'm from Atlanta, right? But like you know, you have Coca-Cola and now there's all kinds of drinks, right? If think about Southwest Airlines, they started in Texas, but then they opened up a bunch of new routes, right? It's like you're going to have to eventually grow out of whatever you start in the beginning. But if you have a theory and you have a philosophy and you have a opinion on the market that nobody else has or very few people have, and you have a unique way to address it, then you're in a good place.
That's really well said. So you got into YC at the 2019 winter batch. And here's an interesting question.
Hmm.
Have you ever thought about why you got in? And what do you think is the reason why YC took a bet on you in the first place?
YC rejected us in the first place. Did you know that? The first
I
time we applied to YC, they rejected us.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
You did it again. How many times did you apply?
twice. But the first time they
Twice.
rejected us. So I think that like the first time, it's clarity. I wasn't very clear on what I was doing.
Did get into the interview process, right? Did
I
okay.
did get into the interview process the first time, but I got rejected. And so I think the very important thing that I learned is importance of not just having an opinion about a market or founders that are aligned or a team or funding. Like you really have to have clarity of thought, right? If you have clarity of thought, then that really helps you a lot. So,
Why did they
and so,
reject? Oh, they rejected you because you lacked clarity of thought in the beginning, and they
yeah,
did.
I don't think I communicated our idea very well the first time, and they thought of us as a competitor to LinkedIn, which we're not, and
All right.
and I didn't do a great job of addressing questions related to that.
So the second time you got into YC,
That's right.
at that, did you really prepare a lot? Uh, you lost the before time, and this time, what did you improve in between?
My communication,
That's
and
it.
also also between the first application and the second application, we raised $300,000 and started executing on what we said that we're going to do. So then when we reapplied, we had already been doing something. So yeah,
So that's how you got in. That's
yeah.
really great. Was there any moment you felt really humiliated at that point while building career karma? So that drove your motivation to a point where you worked thrice as hard. And really, what is that driving force that spurred you on, regardless of all the resistance that you encountered early on before?
Yeah, I mean, I still feel that. I feel that feeling all the time, publicly or privately. I think it feels good when everything's working perfectly, but when things aren't working perfectly and you have to make hard decisions, like, I remember during the pandemic, I had to make some decisions related to the workforce. Like, I didn't have to do any layoffs during the pandemic, and I was able to retain the whole team. But then, recently I did have to do layoffs. That doesn't feel good when, that's in the news. Um, but it's something that you have to do sometimes. And even Amazon and Microsoft did it this year. It's like these are decisions that you have to make as a CEO, and it doesn't feel very good because you care about everybody and you're grateful for everybody. But sometimes you got to do what you got to do in order to keep the company alive. You know?
Yeah, that's the toughest job, being the leader, right? And
Hmm.
there's just, a lot of leaders like Elon and Steve Jobs have something in common: the chaos. They are really
Hmm.
chaotic. Have you listened to Jim Keller in Lex Fridman? Jim Keller, the VP of
Hmm.
Tesla. He's an engineer. So there's this
Hmm.
graph where y-axis is productivity of the company, and
Hmm.
x-axis is the chaos in their mind. How chaos in the sense how they are putting hard times on on the employees, and how they are being so rude and mean to the team so that they could get impossible things done quicker. The x-axis is chaos, y-axis is productivity, and the end of the x-axis is actually order. And when this order is achieved, the graph goes like this. It's a bell curve, but as the company gets bigger and bigger and bigger, the graph goes like a bell curve. And when it touches order, the productivity declines slowly. That's what happens with the company getting bigger and more people start working on it, and the founder cannot manage every single person individually. So, do you think great founders like them pull out at certain points while so that the bell curve doesn't touch the order? Do you think that founders should be mean, hard, and so rude so that people could get work done and do impossible things, put life or death like situation on
Mm,
employees?
I don't think that you need to be mean or rude, but you do need to be direct and clear. And you need to not lie to yourself about a current reality. Like, if, like, I really liked what, I saw a statement by Netflix. The Netflix statement pretty much described their team culture, which I thought was pretty nice. He pretty much said a lot of times when you talk to companies, they refer to their team as a family, and I've definitely done that before too. Um, but what I like about Netflix is, like they said, we're not a family, we're a team, and not a kids recreational team. Netflix leader hire, develop, and cut smartly, so we have stars in every position. And what I like about that is when you're on a team, it is very well known that players will get traded, players will get cut, players will get invested into and developed so that they can be the best that they can be. They will be supported, they will be nurtured. But if you're not pulling your weight on the team, you will not be able to be there. It's also very well known that coaches are required. So, the leader has to not only tell people what to do, but they actually have to sit there and work with them and guide them and give them feedback about how they're performing, what they can do in order to improve. You don't just cut somebody out of nowhere, unless, drastic changes need to be made. But for the most part, if you have that type of ideology, then I think that's beneficial. Um, I think where founders get perceived as mean is we are visionaries. And so, as visionaries that can see the future, everybody else can't see what you see. And you have to lead them, and they have to kind of follow you with faith that you understand what's going on while you're also getting their feedback about it. And that is challenging for a lot of people. And sometimes a founder is going to make a call about where to go in the future and be relentless about it. Like, for example, let's say it's Elon with SpaceX, and he's like, "Hey, we need to create reusable rockets, and we have to slash costs by 90%." And let's say that his team is like, "All right, Elon, we can definitely create reusable rockets, but it's impossible to slash space costs by 90%." And Elon's going to be like, "What?" Like, he's gonna be like, no, like, you were hired to figure out how to create reusable rockets and slash space costs by 90%. If you can't do it, get out, right? And that's okay. Like, I'm not. You can go somewhere else and create expensive rockets, right? That's no hate on you, right? I still love you, but that's what it is, right? And I don't want to speak for them because I'm not them, but like, and I'm not saying that the stories of all these other founders are they aren't mean or they're not maniacal or hardcore. I would just say that when I read these stories about people that have people working on the weekends and working late and early, I understand, and I want that same type of energy too. But everybody has different leadership styles.
Yeah, it's actually really hard to be around obsessed people. And then on the early days, I heard from a friend of yours that you used to sit and cold call a lot of people. You just used to sit
Hmm.
and cold call. Even the way you got in investment banking was of that, right? How would you advise introverted founders to build that level of confidence? And do you think being shameless and emotionless is the only way to get things done? Because cold calling is actually people talk harsh things, right? On the other side.
I would say, um, never be shameless, never be emotionless. You should always put your heart into everything that you do, in my opinion. That doesn't mean that sometimes your heart may be telling you to do one thing when your mind knows that you have to do something else. But you should always put your heart into everything that you do, in my opinion, my personal opinion. Shameless, I think, I think you should always be respectful of people. And I think growing up in the South, I learned how to be very smooth and learn how to approach people with grace to where I don't really have conversations with people that say mean things to me. Like if you want to fight me, if you want to say mean things to me, or you want to compete with me, you win. I'm not gonna argue with you. I'm not gonna fight with you. I'm not gonna. If you don't want to talk to me, like I'll put you on the do not call list. I'm gonna just move on to the next, so we save each other's time. But if you're someone that wants to change your life and you want to come to career conference so we can help you find a better career, I'll do that. And I want you to be better than me, but I'm not gonna waste my time pouring into you if you don't want to be poured into. That's like the early days, but these days, I'm doing the same thing, talking to companies. I'm talking to companies about how they think about talent development and the tools that they've invested in, and I'm providing career navigation software to these companies to help provide career development for all their employees while achieving business objectives at an affordable price. And I am doing it in a forward thinking way, leveraging technologies like AI and things like that. But some people are not ready for that. Some people are risk averse, and that's okay. If they are not ready for that, I will. I don't see it as a no. I'll see it as a see you later. Similar to Y Combinator. It's like I can name other firms that told me no in the beginning, that told me no, and then told me yes later. I'll see you later. Because I know from a philosophy and a homework perspective that what I'm building to help people by giving people a coach, a roadmap, and community for everyone at scale within companies and externally in the world for people that are seeking guidance in their career is key and necessary and needs to exist in the world. And I'm going to build that. I'm going to be the builder.
All right, sounds really amazing. I think a lot, all the introverted founders right now should pick up the phone and start cold calling their customers at the beginning. Most founders do that. Most founders do that, but there are still some people who still hesitate to do that, right? This
Oh
really
yeah, you said
helps.
the advice for the introverts. So like, um, my brother's an introvert, right? So I'm the extrovert. Um, and it wasn't easy for him at first, but it's very similar to music, right? How do you get better at learning an instrument, learning music, or playing chess?
You just start doing it. It's just
Exactly. You
hard at the
practice.
beginning.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so what I would say is if you're nervous, maybe just start small. Just be like, hey, I'm gonna do one cold call or five cold calls or 10 this week and record all of them. And then listen to yourself and then critique yourself and ask yourself what you would do better and just keep doing that and keep doing that and keep doing that. You're just going to get better and better and better and better and better. And eventually you're going to be a rock star. One of my best friends, Pedro Frias, he's an introvert and he's one of the greatest salespeople I know, but that's how he started. Maybe don't even do it at a startup. Get a random job at like a gym or get a job, at a call center and just practice. before you even start a company,
Sales is
which you'll
always
learn.
going to be there.
Exactly.
So, what do you think does the future look like for Career Karma, and what is the next ambition? So, I also came across an article that you partnered up with Google to support Black
hmm
people and prep them
Yeah,
for tech career. What's
yeah,
that all about?
yeah, yeah. Thank you for asking. So the last 5 years, for people that don't know, Career Combo provides career navigation technology for people that want to break into tech. But our vision has always been to help anyone grow in their career, regardless of whether it's entry level, mid level, or senior level, all over the world. And um, if you think about the last 5 years with our career navigation software, it's been a human driven service supported by product. But the next 5 years have to be a product driven service supported by humans because without product, without leveraging large language models like LLMs, it's impossible to be able to provide career guidance for any skill set in any industry in less than 10 years, right? Because if I take the current approach by talking to schools, getting the schools matched up with this, with the people, it's impossible to just talk to every single school that comes out in the world to provide career advice for people. But by leveraging tools like large language models, I can essentially answer any question for any person throughout their life. I can also take our three pillars of giving people a coach, a roadmap, and a community, and I can provide personalized coaching to every single human being at scale at an affordable price that can speak any language, that's available 24/7, that not only they can talk to, not type to, talk to, but also have actionable goals that are given to them that they can put on their roadmap and have a platform that holds them accountable to the goal. Because if you want to learn anything or grow in any way in your career, you need to create a quick win. So, for example, if you wanted to create a podcast and you're working at a company, our coach can tell you, hey, talk to somebody inside of the company that started a podcast so you can learn. And then they could follow up and hold you accountable. And then you could also create community by connecting with other people that have similar roadmaps to you, that their coach generated by them, and you can create amazing communities inside of companies and outside of companies. So Google came up to us saying, hey, we see that you've created amazing career navigation technology that leverages content, audio and video, AI, all these things. Can you help us with our Tech Equity Collective initiative to double the number of Black workers in the workforce, starting with 5,000 people? And so we created something called Black Genius Academy, where we're not only giving action plans for free to anyone that wants to get a job in software engineering, design, or cybersecurity. We're also giving them free access to Google certificates and other companies in the Tech Equity Collective because it's not just about Google, it's about other companies as well. So all of their free training, and then for a select few of people that complete their action plans, which takes about a month, we actually give them full scholarships covered by Google and other foundations and companies into a boot camp. And so we've given away, since we launched 2 months ago, we already have almost 4,000 signups. We've given away 38 full scholarships, and there's more to come.
That's
38,
that's
38,
totally
yeah.
awesome.
And we're starting off with 5,000, but again, the vision is to double the number of Black workers in the tech workforce, which and get it at parity with the census. And so that essentially is in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. So it's a test to do something bigger.
All right, let's now talk about an entirely different topic,
Okay.
AGI. So, what do you think would be the state of human civilization when AGI is achieved? And it sure is going to replace a lot of jobs, and it is doing right now. It is happening right now. And how would you think humans would position themselves in order to be useful in that era?
Yeah. I think that for the people that don't know what AGI is, I think a simple way to understand it is essentially like getting AI to the point where it's like the human brain, right? And I am in the you've probably seen the little thing on Twitter which says, E-ACC, the whole
Yes,
um
effective acceleration.
yeah, effective acceleration. So I'm definitely in the effective acceleration camp. Even though I'm not as against effective altruism as so many other people, so that might be my controversial side. Like, I think there's like a combination of both. Where like, I think that I am definitely about acceleration at all costs because if you look at history, the fears of new technologies and like the internet, for example, don't always play out as like scary as it seems in the movies, right? When you look at movies like Terminator, you look at movies like anything related to AI, it's always like something dark. Or you read books like 1984, um,
It's
or
always
Brave
doomsday.
New World. It's always doomsday. But what I've learned, even with this primitive version of OpenAI and Bard and Anthropic, is you know they're actually making your life easier, right? If you know how to apply the knowledge, right? So here's the thing with AGI, right? Similar to artificial intelligence to me, right? Is if um if you have an all-knowing thing, like the definition of intelligence, artificial intelligence is not intelligent, right? The definition of intelligence is the application of the knowledge. And so if you have an all-knowing thing that isn't being applied to whatever domain that you're in, then like it's not very helpful. Um, Two, it can't tell the difference between right and wrong. And morally and also factually. And so it has to be trained by humans in order to do that. To your point though, that's not AGI. AGI is actually gets to a point where it can start like understanding these things, but still humans have to like train it in a certain kind of way. And so with that in mind, that is scary actually. That is scary. It could be um there could be downsides to that, but there's downsides to all kinds of technologies. And I think that I'd rather live in a world where AGI exists to help me think through things versus a world where I just have to do it by myself, right? It's like if imagine if all humans were just aided by a best friend that was extremely smart, right? Like that can answer anything for you and guide you in anything that you want, and they're available to you for like free or next to nothing, right? Or like $20 a month, right? That is a beautiful world to be living in from my perspective, and it is gonna free up a lot of jobs. You see what's happening with a lot of freelance work and a lot of stuff is tanking. Um, but that's also the circle of life. Like people don't light candles anymore because you have electricity. But I bet they figured out what to do next, right? That's just acceleration, and I'm here for it. So that's my. But what it forces you to do
Yeah.
is it forces you to get a mindset where you're always learning, right? And that's like because I'm an effective accelerationist, or at least in that camp, I wouldn't say I'm exactly an effective accelerationist. I think that there's always going to be a space for career karma because you're always going to need to learn new skills, always going to need to, you know, train yourself and guide yourself and connect with the right people to help you to where you want to go. Um, and the reason why I say I'm not a purely against effective altruism is I do think that I don't think everything has to be only for profit. I do think that like there's ways to create sustainable things that aren't just like even nonprofits need to have some kind of mechanism. Like even if you're never focused on like maximizing a large amount of money, if you can keep something that's like break even or I guess slightly profitable forever, just because it wants to be a public service and a public good, I think that's fine too. And I think that like at least maybe I don't have the best understanding of effective altruism, but even though I may not be fully clear on it, like at least my understanding of effective altruism is like this. I can choose to be a software engineer, or I can train software engineers to exist in the world. And that's probably a better use of my time. And also probably um, the fastest way to create impact in the world. When I think about business and organizations, it doesn't always have to be to maximize the most amount of money.
Okay, how do you think career karma is going to help when AGI is achieved? Let's say when AGI is achieved right now, tomorrow, let's say, how
Yeah,
is career karma going to help people?
yeah. So that's why I think the whole application of knowledge matters, right? If AGI is achieved and I'm able to imagine if I could create a clone of me on video talking to you, giving you advice, right? And it has AGI in it and it's trained the way that I think and the way I operate. Um, I can actually help teach you hard and soft skills because the cloned version of me. Hold on one second. If I could create a cloned version of me at scale for everybody in the world that you can talk to at the beginning or your end of your day, and just imagine if you just had access to me, or not even me, somebody that you really value getting advice from at any time of your day. And then you made sure that every time it talks to you, it gives you something to do. And then it shows up on a roadmap for you. And then you check in with it once a week, but you have to follow your roadmap maybe every day, right? And you might talk to your coach whenever you get stuck on something. And then based off of whatever action item that your coach gave you, you're able to connect with other people that are similar to you that are doing the same thing so you can work cross functionally together. That's what I want to create with Career Karma, to um, do this at scale all over the world. There's a really cool interview by Peter Diamandis where he's like interviewing a clone version of himself, which I think is pretty awesome. Um, But essentially, it's the same thing that we're doing with Career Karma right now with humans. It's like we give everybody a coach, a roadmap in the community. So if AGI is achieved, it actually helps me do what I want to do faster.
So, when in 10 years, there will be more AGI bots by Career Karma, which is going to give more support and always going to be available for all of its customers uh, anytime 24 by 7, and they could get advice when they feel low. They could talk to it and get help from it and get a correct roadmap. That
Exactly.
sounds super insane.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Okay.
that's what I want to do. If you think about it, like if you think about like let's say that somebody got laid off today, right? What are they gonna do? They're gonna look for advice, like what kind of company should I work for? Should I go back to school? Who should I talk to that can help me figure out what I want to do next? Like they're always gonna be looking for advice, right? If you're in a job and you just got the job, you're gonna want to know how do I grow? How do I stay? How do I achieve what I personally want? If you've been in a job and you're trying to support your direct reports, you're gonna also look for guidance on how to what do my reports want? What do they want? How do I support them? Right? If you are a CEO, you're going to be like, how do I empower my leaders and my entry level people? Right? And how do I get a pulse of progress of what's going on? You cannot do that without technology and you're not going to get it in a yearly performance review. You have to have something that your employees are engaging with daily, giving them guidance and support along the way.
That's right. So, this is the last segment, and I have one of the most philosophical and interesting question. Do you really understand the purpose of your life on earth? And what do you think is the meaning of life? What is your perspective about life?
I think I understand my purpose on earth. I think my purpose on earth is to help people discover their own purpose. and align their work to it and take their spiritual gifts to not only get a job that makes them money, right? But ask themselves the questions like, why do I want to be a software engineer? Why do I want to be a cybersecurity person? Why do I want to be a salesperson? Because once you get to a certain point and you make all the money that you want, for what? What are you using that for? What are you using those skills for? And so I believe that everybody has spiritual gifts inside of them. And so it's important for you to take those spiritual gifts and figure out how to put them into the world to make it a better place. And so I want to do everything I can to help people do that.
That's really awesome. So thanks for joining the podcast. You've been such an inspiration, Ruben, and I really appreciate you for joining this and supporting me. So thanks
All
for
good.
showing up.
All good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And yeah, let me know if you need anything else. All right.